It took a while, but it finally arrived. Look, Royal Enfield Bear 650 basically, or rather actually the Interceptor Bear 650. The Bear is actually the best Interceptor of all time. We'll talk a little more about that in just a moment. But look, I think it was in 2024 that I was there in California. For me, the best place in the world. Not just to ride motorcycles, but also to live. But mainly to ride motorcycles, right? We were at the global launch event of this beauty. There's a Rolezone Bruto on the channel. Check it out. And look, I think it didn't go more than a week or two without someone asking, so when is it coming to Brazil? When is it coming to Brazil? Asking in that video. It's finally here. This is one of 3 color options. This is the golden shadow with the big golden fork here, inverted Showa suspension, right? It's one of the changes on the Bear compared to the regular Interceptor. We'll list them in a moment. 33,990, basically 34 grand, but this isn't the one you want, right? This black one here, I'll tell you, really takes away from the Bear for me. It loses a lot of that California cool look with this black paint. The other 2 options are much cooler. One would be my choice, the 249, which is the one most inspired by Edwin Mulder's victory in the race back in the 60s at the Big Bear Run, which is kind of the origin story of this bike. Royal Enfield excels at this, right? Their bikes aren't just about colors or models, they have stories. There's a lot of storytelling behind both the models and color choices, as the Vila Olympia marketing team would say. The 249 even has the little number plate here. It's 249, right? You can see here that the Interceptor's fairing becomes a number plate. Low profile like this, look, it's another modification. The frame is in an aqua green, really cool. And the other option is Wild Honey, also very beautiful. It's yellow with a blue seat. The seat, by the way, is another modification. You can see that it's shorter and chunkier than the Interceptors, right? Showing off more of the bike's tail here. Yeah, these are small modifications that really add a lot to the look. Yeah. The Wild Honey is 1,000 Rs cheaper. Yeah, 33,990, right? These ones here are 34,990. The starting price of the Bear is 3,000 more than the price of the Interceptor. And look, it must be one of the best deals on the Brazilian market. That extra 3,000 is the best 3,000 you can spend, right? Because you get a motorcycle with a lot of improvements. It's more beautiful, more up-to-date, and more enjoyable to ride, especially here in Brazil, for example. Compared to the Interceptor, you get the TFT display with the Tripper Dash, right? That navigation app from Raptor. I have my Raptor right outside, look. And then your brain gets a little confused. Compared to the Interceptor, you get the updated big display, and I think the Interceptor already offers the LED headlight too, right? Here you have a little accessory on the grille, but moving on, you get the dual-purpose tires, right? For those extra 3,000. 17-inch rim in the back, 19-inch rim in the front. On the Interceptor, you have 18 on both, right? The Biber brakes are the same, right? This is one of the points. I already owned an Interceptor and was very happy with it. It was one of the bikes I kept the longest, about 3 years. Yeah, my main complaint was the braking power, the initial bite. Here it's a little better. Yeah, I think it's even more because of the calibration of the lever here. Cable, I don't know, rather than the actual hardware itself. You get a 2-in-1 exhaust, right? Which I admit, I expected that. It would give a little extra in terms of sound, but the sound is similar, it doesn't change much. But we have a different tuning here for the venerable 650 engine 47 horsepower, or actually, the engine here made my brain glitch because it's 47 horsepower and 4.7 kilogram meters of torque. Half a kilo more there. The engine is tuned to be more responsive, right? More torque, and also the throttle calibration itself. It's much nimbler in city traffic. The final gear ratio is also shorter, so it's much nimbler than the Interceptor. Obviously it revs higher, right? So at cruising speeds it ends up revving more, and the fuel consumption gets a little worse. The rear brake is actually bigger than the one here on the Interceptor, also a single piston. I ended up checking the spec sheet for the torque and made a slight correction. Actually, the Golden Shadow is 34,490 and the 249 is 34,990. So there's a 500 real difference. 500 Rs well spent to move up from the Golden Shadow to the 249. And then For the rest, it's very much like the Interceptor, right? Here's something new too, right? The tail light is different. It has the LED turn signal. But what I mean is, I was a happy Interceptor user because I think it works really well in Sao Paulo. I used to joke, it's kind of like a big old land yacht, right? A motorcycle with a long wheelbase? Yeah. A suspension with a nice travel, actually even longer travel here too. As for the Interceptor, it does really well in Sao Paulo. It feels like a big old land yacht, and it has the torque, right? Which allows you, well, you'll see in the test, you can start off in second gear with it. And in city traffic, yeah, I joke that third gear is kind of like drive. You put it in third and you can use it from 30 to 80 in third gear. All right, let's wake up the engine here. I'm gonna get a little closer to the exhaust here. So you see, right, the sound could be a little more aggressive, right? A bit rougher. It's got a very Interceptor-like sound, which isn't bad, but the bike promises a bit more aggressiveness that when it comes to the exhaust note, it just doesn't deliver. Here are the guards. I believe they're also accessories, but that's another feature that sets it apart. And it brings, look at the little bear here from the Big Bear Run. It brings this blend of comfort, good performance, usability, and a relatively affordable price, right? Which makes it a very competitive bike here in the Brazilian market. Me, I'm already a bit fed up with my R3. I'm always in this cycle, right? I spend 1 or 2 years with a lower displacement bike because I want agility, something light for city traffic. Then I get tired of a bike without power and switch to a higher displacement bike and stay with it for a year or two. Then I start getting annoyed with the size and go back to a smaller one. So right now, I'm at the point of leaving the smaller bike and going back to a bigger one. Yeah, I'm seriously considering the Bear. I'm not saying for sure that I'll get a Bear because it's very similar to the Interceptor, right? I like to have new experiences, and I was talking about this daily use thing. It weighs 214 kilos, right? Like any good Royal Enfield, a lot of metal, a lot of steel, right? It ends up being a bike that's a bit heavy when it comes to maneuvering and all that. But it has a really low center of gravity, so it hides its weight well. And yes, it's an excellent option for you if you want a workhorse for everyday city riding that also lets you do some light trail riding. There are always bad roads in Brazil, so anything off-road like my Raptor out there will always be useful in your daily life. I think it's an excellent option, one of the best values. Look at this little animation here on the current national motorcycle market. But I wouldn't go for this Golden Shadow, no. I'd go for the 249 or the Wild Honey. So do this. Hop on the helmet cam and let's show a little bit of how this beast behaves in the real world. But after all, how does it ride, Deputy? Like I said back there in the garage, right? You can see Bear. Oh wow, going over the speed bumps here. You can think of Bear as the best Interceptor of all time, right? Especially for daily use here in Sao Paulo. It improves on the Interceptor in every way, especially having more suspension travel. That's very welcome. The handlebars are also wider and higher, so you end up in an even more comfortable position. Not that the Interceptor wasn't already comfortable, and the seat too, right? One complaint, I myself had the GV cover on my Interceptor. Shout out to the folks at GV. Yeah, there's some filming going on over there. Yeah, almost every, well, not every, right? But a lot of Interceptor owners put some kind of extra cover to make the seat softer. The Bear's seat is already naturally more, it has more foam, right? Power, and that's something else. Look how the exhaust note could be a little more distinct, right? Yeah, and like I said before, everything that makes the bike more suitable for off-road also makes it more suitable for daily use in Sao Paulo, right? So, the extra suspension travel is very welcome. The 19-inch front wheel, right? The bigger the wheel, the less you feel the potholes. That's also very welcome. The, wow, extra half a kilo of torque is also super welcome. Dual-purpose tires also end up being welcome in Sao Paulo, right? Even though the maximum grip limit is lower than the more street-oriented tires on the Interceptor. When you ride on a lot of dirty asphalt along the way, a lot of bad pavement, a tougher tire also ends up being very welcome. Pardon the redundancy. I didn't stop to talk about the dashboard here, right? The Tripper dash, but gear indicator, right? On a bike with great low-end torque and a flat torque curve, it's really useful. As I said, the engine is so flexible. 5th gear, 50 kilometers per hour. Here it goes. Pop, 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 pop. And it just keeps going. And I joked, right, that 3rd gear is basically drive. Look, see how flexible the engine is. I'm here too. Picture coming out of a corner at 40 kilometers per hour in 3rd gear, the bike responds. And if I want to now, of course, I'm not going to do that, right? But if I want to ride here on the marginal at 80 kilometers per hour, in 3rd gear, it goes up to 5,000 RPMs, right? There's still 3,000 RPMs left. Yeah. So you can, almost exaggerating a bit, ride the bear in the city like a scooter, right? You don't need to keep shifting gears here. Look, 3rd gear all the way. Of course, we're not going to keep revving the engine like this. Yeah, the extra responsiveness it has on the throttle is also very noticeable. Look, wow, you give it some gas and it goes. And if you're not from here in Sao Paulo, look, the informal motorcycle corridor here on the marginal is always the one right next to the far left lane. So now, yes, we're going to have the company of some other biker friends. Yeah, and speaking of competition, right, who competes with Bear? It's that old trump card, right? I always joke that the Indian brands, especially Royal Enfield, because Royal Enfield has something that none of these other brands like Bajaj or even the Chinese ones have. CF Moto, Royal Enfield is really good at giving personality to their bikes, right? At having, like I said, a story behind them. Their branding is really strong, right? They built their brand very quickly in Brazil. It's kind of like a low-cost Harley Davidson, right? You become part of a tribe of Royal fans, and there are the clothes, and there are the cool dealerships with breakfast. That also, in Royal's case, brought a lot of people who were kind of new to the motorcycle world to Royal, right? Royal has a very high rate of female riders, and especially in the 350 line, a lot of customers who are buying their first motorcycle with Royal, right? Yeah, it brought many people into this world. Largely because of how user-friendly it is, right? Its robustness and everything, but also the history, right? A product that became highly desirable very quickly and does that by doing the hardest thing, right? Which is offering affordable prices. So, its competition ends up being, for example, if you want a motorcycle with a certain vibe, with this style and in this price range, from a cool brand and all, the Triumph Speed 400, 400X and XC would be obvious competitors, right? Same price range, but they come with a 400cc engine, right? So the Royal 450s with the Sherpa engine are in a lower price range. So Royal ends up being very competitive in that, right? In terms of specs and style, the most logical competitor to the Royal 650 line would be the Bonneville family from Triumph, which is always above 50,000 Rs, right? Of course, they are bikes that are dynamically much better, deliver more performance, more braking, right? They deliver more acceleration, more power anyway. Triumph gives you more, but you pay more for it, right? And if you don't have the extra, well, Royal ends up being, I felt a bit of the rumble there in the tunnel. So the Royal ends up being a very appealing option. And that's why the brand has, in Brazil, its second largest market in the world today. And Triumph, with this 400 line, which, if you stop to think about it, really follows the same positioning as Royal, right? Motorcycles designed for the Indian market with lower engine displacement, simpler designs, but a lot of style, a lot of personality, right? Brand positioning, that so-called storytelling, done very well with competitive prices. This 400 line from Triumph simply made the Brazilian subsidiary of Triumph become the biggest in the world, right? So we can see how this formula, both in the case of Royal and in the case of Triumph, really delivers great results in Brazil, right? Royal is now in the top 5 in the Brazilian market, right? Something unthinkable when the brand first arrived in Brazil, especially when you consider that Royal has a pretty narrow lineup, right? They're really focused on this mid-displacement range, not going below 350, not going above 650. And of course, they do it really well, right? With the 3 platforms they have, 350, 450, and 650. They have, I don't know, you'd have to count, but around 10 models, right? They keep slicing up these niches and really satisfying consumers, always with that value for money. Yeah, value and style, you could say, right? Yeah, that's the foundation of a very competitive formula for Royal. Agree? Disagree? Let us know in the comments. If you want to see this bike being pushed hard, riding off-road at high speeds on the highway, check out our video with it in California from 2 years ago. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you think the Bear 650 will be positioned in the pecking order of the national motorcycle market. Thanks a lot. Take good care of yourself. Let's hit the mall, man. Got a lot of errands to run here. You see how we use the bikes in the real world for everyday tasks. Thanks a lot. Take care, and a big hug.